The moment that changed everything, the sun had just begun to set over the quiet hills of Palo Alto, casting long shadows across the back garden of a modest but elegant home. Soft golden light spilled over the trees, and the air smelled faintly of jasmine and cut grass. Sundar Pichai stood by the kitchen window, sipping a cup of tea that had gone cold in his hands. The house was quiet, too quiet, like the calm before a storm. He was home early for once. Meetings had ended ahead of schedule, and there was a rare window of time where the world wasn't tugging at him. He should have felt at peace, but something was off. He couldn't explain it, just a strange weight in his chest, a flicker of restlessness in his mind. That was when he saw it got outside. In the garden near the old wooden bench, under the guava tree, his 12-year-old son, Arjun, sat with his back turned to the house. Sundar's brow furrowed. He watched for a moment. Arjun's shoulders were shaking. A sinking feeling gripped him. He placed the cup down and stepped out onto the patio. The garden was quiet except for the faint chirping of birds settling in. For the night, the sound of his footsteps on the stone path was gentle, but Arjun didn't turn around. "Arjun," Sundar called softly that his son flinched. Then slowly, as if it took all the energy in the world, Arjun turned his face. Sundar's heart stopped. The boy's eyes were red, his cheeks streaked with tears. Sundar hurried to his side and sat down beside him. The wood of the bench creaked slightly beneath their weight. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Sundar didn't want to rush him. He placed a hand gently on Arjun's back. "Hey, I'm here," Sundar said. "Talk to me." Arjun tried to speak, but his lips trembled. He looked away, ashamed. Sundar had seen him fall off bicycles, struggle through piano recitals, even get bullied once in school. But he had never seen this kind of quiet pain in his son's eyes. Finally, Arjun took a deep breath and whispered, "I didn't tell you because I thought you'd be disappointed in me." Sundar felt his chest tighten. "Why would I be disappointed?" He asked gently that Arjun hesitated, his hands clutching the edge of the bench so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "Because," Arjun started, his voice cracking, "because I'm not like you. I'm not smart like you. I'm not strong like you. And today, I got called a failure." The word hung in the air like a stone sinking in water. Sundar blinked, stunned. "Who said that to you?" "Some kids at school. And the teacher, she didn't say it exactly, but she looked at my test and I could tell she thought it too. I got a D, Papa. A D." Arjun's voice broke at the last word. He buried his face in his hands. Sundar sat there, frozen, the soft wind rustling the leaves above them. For a few seconds, memories came flooding back to him being a boy in Chennai, growing up in a house with no refrigerator, sharing one room with his entire family, struggling to find his place in a world that didn't wait for people like him. He looked at Arjun, not the grade, not the mistake, not the tears, but his son. And what he saw was not weakness. It was something deeper, something beautiful. "Arjun," Sundar said quietly, "look at me." His son slowly raised his head. "Do you think I never failed?" Sundar asked. Arjun sniffed. "No, I mean maybe, but not like this." Sundar shook his head. "I have failed more times than you can imagine. Do you know I didn't get into the first college I applied for? I got rejected. I was heartbroken, but I didn't stop. I kept going. And when I got to America, I couldn't even afford a proper winter coat. I used to sit in classes freezing, hoping no one would notice how thin my jacket was." Arjun blinked. "Really?" "Yes," Sundar nodded. "And there were days when I felt like I didn't belong. People would talk fast, use big words, act like they were better. I was quiet, unsure, just like you feel right now. But you know what kept me going?" Arjun shook his head. "Kindness," Sundar said. "One professor took the time to explain something again when I didn't get it. One friend helped me find a part-time job. One stranger gave me directions when I was lost in the snow. These small acts gave me strength." Arjun looked at his father, his breathing slowing. "You don't have to be like me," Sundar continued. "You just have to be you. And if that means failing sometimes, so be it. Do you know what matters more than grades?" Arjun shook his head again. what you do after you fail. A silence settled over them. Sundar could feel the emotion hanging in the air like mist. Then Arjun asked, "But what if I try again and fail again?" Sundar smiled, the kind of smile that comes from pain turned into wisdom. Then you try again, and again, and again. Because the world needs people who don't give up. The world needs your heart, not just your grades. Arjun leaned into him, resting his head on his father's shoulder. Sundar wrapped an arm around him, feeling the warmth of his son's small frame. And just when it seemed the moment was ending, Arjun spoke again. "There's something else I didn't tell you." Sundar looked down. "What is it?" Arjun hesitated, then whispered, "There's a boy in my class. He was crying today too. The other kids made fun of him because he wears the same clothes every day. They called him poor, and I didn't say anything. I just stood there. I wanted to say something, Papa, but I was scared." Sundar's breath caught. "I understand," he said gently, "but it felt wrong, really wrong." "It was wrong," Sundar said, "but you recognizing that it means your heart is awake, and that's more important than anything." Arjun looked up at him with wide eyes. "What should I do?" Sundar took a long breath. The wind had grown still. The world seemed to be listening. "You do better next time," he said softly. "You stand up for him. You sit with him. You talk to him. You treat him like a human being. That's how you change the world, Arjun." Not with titles or fame or big companies, with small, kind choices. They sat in silence for a long time. Then suddenly Arjun sat upright. "Can I tell you something else?" "Of course," Sundar said. "I think I want to do something for him, something kind." Before Sundar could respond, Arjun stood up. There was a new look in his eyes. Something had shifted, but just as he turned toward the house, he stopped in his tracks. "Papa?" he said, his voice suddenly small again. "Yes? I just remembered something. He told me his dad doesn't live with him anymore." Sundar stood, his heart aching. "What do you mean?" he said. "He said his dad left one day and never came back. And that sometimes his mom cries in the kitchen when she thinks he's asleep." Sundar closed his eyes. The sun had dipped below the horizon now, and shadows had swallowed the garden. But inside Sundar's heart, something had just ignited. "Arjun," he said, his voice low and full of emotion. "We're going to do something about that." Arjun turned, confused. "Do what?" Sundar didn't answer right away. He looked at the house, then back at his son, and then he said something that would change both their lives forever. "We're going to find him." Asterisk, the promise in the dark. It was quiet that evening, but inside Sundar's mind there was a storm. He sat at the kitchen table long after Arjun had gone to bed, staring at his phone but not really seeing it. The words he had spoken earlier, "We're going to find him," echoed in his head over and over. The weight of that promise pressed down on his chest like a stone. He had said it without thinking, because he couldn't bear to see his son carry that kind of helplessness in his eyes. But now he wondered how he would even begin to keep it outside. The garden lay in darkness, but the memory of Arjun crying there felt fresh, like it had only just happened. Sundar thought about the boy his son had described, the one who wore the same clothes every day, the one who cried alone at night, the one who had been left behind by his own father. Sundar imagined him sitting in a small room somewhere, feeling invisible, believing that no one cared. And something inside Sundar tightened. He knew that feeling too well. He stood up, walked to the window, and watched the faint lights of the neighborhood twinkle in the distance. He remembered his own father, how quietly he had worked, how little he had spoken, but how much he had sacrificed. Sundar's father hadn't always had the right words to say, but he had been there. And now Sundar wondered what it did to a boy when no one was there. When he finally climbed the stairs to Arjun's room, the boy was already asleep. He looked younger in sleep, his fists unclenched, his breathing even. Sundar stood the doorway for a long moment, his heart heavy but determined. The next morning, over breakfast, Sundar watched his son push his cereal around the bowl. The boy's usual chatter was gone, replaced by a quiet thoughtfulness that seemed too heavy for his age. Sundar cleared his throat. I meant what I said last night, he said. Arjun looked up, his eyes wary but hopeful. About finding him? Arjun asked. Asterisk. Yes, Sundar nodded. But first, we have to learn more. Tell me everything you know about him. Everything he told you, even the small details. Arjun thought for a moment, then spoke slowly. His name is Om. He doesn't talk much. He sits in the back of the class. He eats lunch alone. He likes to draw. I've seen his notebooks. He's really good, but his shoes have holes. And sometimes his shirt has stains. And when the kids teased him, he didn't even look angry. He just looked tired. Sundar listened carefully, each word painting a clearer picture in his mind. Did he say where he lives? Just in an apartment near the park. But he didn't say. Which one? And about his father, did he say anything else? Arjun shook his head. Just that one day his dad left and never came back. And that his mom works a lot. She's always tired too. Sundar nodded slowly, already forming a plan in his mind. All right, he said. Today, after school, we'll go to the park. Maybe we'll see him. And if not, we'll figure out the next step. Arjun's eyes widened. Really? Really, Sundar said. When someone needs help, you don't wait for someone else to do it. You step in. That's what respect means. It means seeing someone as worthy, even when the world forgets them. Arjun's face softened, and for the first time since yesterday, he smiled a little. After school, they drove to the park. It was a warm afternoon, the kind that brought families out to picnic and kids out to play. Sundar parked the car and glanced at his son. Arjun's hands were clenched in his lap. Nervous? Sundar asked. A little, Arjun admitted. What? If he doesn't want to talk to me? That's okay, Sundar said. Sometimes kindness starts just by showing up. Let's walk. They wandered through the park, past children playing on the swings and old men feeding pigeons. Sundar watched. Arjun scanned every face, his eyes darting from group to group. After a while, Arjun tugged at his sleeve. There, he whispered Dot near the edge of the park. Under a tree, sat a boy with messy hair and a faded backpack. He was scribbling in a notebook, oblivious to the noise around him. Even from a distance, Sundar could see the holes in his sneakers and the frayed edges of his shirt. Arjun took a step forward, then stopped. His breath quickened. You can do this, Sundar whispered. Just say hi. Arjun nodded, swallowed hard, and walked over. Sundar stayed back, giving them space but keeping a watchful eye. He watched as Arjun stood in front of the boy for a long second before finally saying something. The boy looked up, startled at first, then confused. Arjun spoke again, and the boy's shoulders seemed to relax just slightly. After a moment, Arjun sat down beside him. They began talking in low voices. Sundar felt a quiet pride stir in his chest, but then suddenly something shifted. He saw the boy Om glance up and noticed Sundar standing there. Om's eyes went wide, and he quickly shut his notebook, clutching it to his chest. Sundar frowned, sensing something wasn't right. Arjun turned back toward him and motioned for him to come over to Dot as Sundar approached. He saw fear flicker in Om's eyes. The boy's body tensed, and he scooted slightly away. Hi, Sundar said softly. You must be Om. I'm Arjun's dad. Om didn't answer. He just stared at the ground, his fingers gripping the notebook. It's okay, Sundar continued gently. We just wanted to say hello. Finally, Om spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Are you going to tell my mom? Sundar blinked, caught off guard. Tell her what? Om hesitated, then shook his head. Nothing. Sundar crouched down to meet his gaze. Om, he said kindly. Whatever it is, you don't have to be afraid. We just want to help. But Om's eyes filled with tears. He stood up abruptly, clutching his notebook like a shield. Then, without another word, he ran. Om. Arjun called after him, but the boy didn't stop. He disappeared through the park gates, leaving only the faint echo, his footsteps behind. Sundar stood slowly, his mind racing. He felt Arjun's small hand slip into his. "Papa," Arjun whispered. "Why did he run?" Sundar didn't answer. Right away. He stared at the gates where the boy had vanished, and deep in his gut he knew something was wrong. Something much bigger than a bad grade or bullies at school. He squeezed Arjun's hand gently and said, "Because sometimes when people have been hurt too much, even kindness feels dangerous." Arjun's eyes filled with quiet determination. "Then what do we do?" He asked. Sundar looked down at his son, then back toward the empty park gates. "We find out why he's afraid," he said firmly, "and we don't give up until we do." But as they turned to leave, Sundar's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen, expecting it to be an email from work. But it wasn't. It was an unknown number. And the message made his blood run cold. "Stay away from the boy. You don't know what you're getting into." Sundar froze, the words burning in his mind. He read the message again and again, his pulse quickening. Arjun looked up at him, confused. "Papa, what's wrong?" Sundar slipped the phone back into his pocket, forcing a calm smile he didn't feel. "Nothing," he lied. "Let's go home." But inside, his thoughts were anything but calm. Someone was watching. Someone knew what they were trying to do. And someone didn't want them to help Om. And in that moment, Sundar realized this was no longer just about kindness. This was about something darker. Something that could hurt them all. As they walked back to the car, the sun dipped below the horizon, and the shadows in the park seemed to grow longer, deeper. Sundar glanced back one last time at the tree where Om had been sitting, and a quiet resolve settled over him. Whatever secrets lay ahead, he would uncover them, because no child deserved to cry alone in the dark. Asterisk whispers in the rain began late that night, falling softly at first and then harder, drumming against the windows like a warning. Sundar sat in his study, staring at his phone. The message from the unknown number was still on the screen, glowing faintly in the dark room. "Stay away from the boy. You don't know what you're getting into?" He turned the words over in his mind, and again, who would send such a thing? And why? The boy, Om, barely spoke. He hardly even looked up from his notebook. What danger could possibly surround him? But the more Sundar thought about it, the more unsettled he felt. He had seen something in Om's eyes at the park. Not just sadness, not just fear. Something else. Something like a secret. Down the hall, he heard the soft shuffle of feet. He looked up to see Arjun standing there in his pajamas, clutching a small pillow. "Papa," Arjun whispered. "I can't sleep." Sundar smiled faintly and held out his hand. Arjun crossed the room and curled up beside him on the couch. His hair smelled like soap, and his hands were still small, though they were starting to lose the softness of childhood. "Are you thinking about him too?" Arjun asked quietly. "Yes," Sundar admitted. "I can't stop thinking about him." Arjun stared at the rain-streaked window. "Do you think he's okay?" Sundar hesitated, then said, "I don't know. But I do know we're going to find out." Arjun looked at him, and there it was again. That quiet determination that reminded Sundar so much of himself at that age. "How?" Arjun asked. Sundar thought for a long moment. Then he said, "We go where he lives, near the park, tomorrow." Arjun nodded solemnly. Then he rested his head on Sundar's shoulder and fell asleep to the sound of rain. The next day, as soon as school was over, they drove to the park again. The clouds hung low, heavy with the threat of more rain. The park itself was almost empty. Just a few people hurrying along the paths. Arjun led the way this time, his eyes scanning every corner of the park. They walked past the playground, past the benches, past the tree where Om had been sitting yesterday. But there was no sign of him. "Maybe he's home," Arjun said, quietly. Sundar nodded. They left the park and walked toward the cluster of apartment buildings nearby. The buildings were old, their paint peeling, the balconies cluttered with drying clothes and broken chairs. Sundar felt the weight of each step. Aware that this was a part of town he had never really noticed before, they stopped at the first building. Sundar pushed the buzzer marked manager and waited. After a moment, the door buzzed and swung open. The lobby smelled faintly of damp concrete and cooking oil. An older woman sat behind a small desk, flipping through a magazine. She looked up as they approached, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Can I help you?" she asked. Sundar smiled politely. "Yes, we're looking for a boy named Om. He lives here, I believe. He goes to school with my son." The woman's face changed at the mention of the name. She closed her magazine slowly and leaned back in her chair. "Why?" she asked. "We just want to talk to him," Sundar said. "And to his mother if she's home." The woman studied him for a long moment. Then she shook her head. "It's not a good idea," she said finally. "Leave him alone." Sundar felt a chill run down his spine. "Why do you say that?" The woman lowered her voice. "There's trouble in that apartment. Police have been here before, shouting at all hours. The boy, he doesn't say much, but his mother, she's got problems. Not your kind of problem to fix, sir." Arjun clutched Sundar's hand tighter. "We'd still like to see them," Sundar said firmly. The woman sighed, clearly unhappy. But she scribbled a number on a scrap of paper and slid it across the desk. "Apartment 27, 3rd floor. Don't say I didn't warn you." They climbed the narrow stairwell, each step echoing off the walls. On the 3rd floor, the hallway was dim and smelled faintly of cigarette smoke. Sundar found apartment 27 and paused. He could hear faint voices inside, though he couldn't make out the words. He knocked gently. No answer. He knocked again. After a long moment, the door opened a crack. And there stood Om, his eyes wide, his notebook clutched to his chest. He froze when he saw them. Double quotes, Om, Sundar said softly. "We just wanted to talk." Behind him, a woman's voice barked sharply. "Who is it?" Om didn't answer. He just stared at Sundar, his face pale. The door opened wider, and a woman appeared. She was thin, her hair pulled back messily, dark circles under her eyes. She glanced at Sundar and Arjun, her expression hard. "What do you want?" she demanded. "We're here because we care about Om," Sundar said gently. "My son goes to school with him. They're friends." The woman let out a bitter laugh. "Friends? He doesn't need friends. He needs people to mind their own business." She started to close the door, but Sundar stopped it with his hand. "Please," he said, "we're not here to cause trouble. We just want to understand. He seems scared. We just want to help." For a second, something flickered in the woman's eyes, pain, regret. But then it was gone. "There's nothing you can do," she said flatly. "Just go." Before Sundar could respond, a loud crash came from somewhere deeper inside the apartment. Both Sundar and Arjun flinched. The woman's face went pale. She glanced over her shoulder, then back at them. "You need to leave. Now." She hissed. She shoved the door closed so forcefully that Sundar stumbled back. They stood there in the hallway, stunned. Inside, through the thin door, they heard another crash. And then a man's angry voice shouting into them. "Could understand?" Arjun looked up at Sundar, his eyes wide with fear. "Papa," he whispered, "there's someone in there." Sundar's pulse quickened. He stood there for a long moment, his hand hovering near the door, his mind racing. Something was very, very wrong in that apartment. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "Arjun," he said quietly, "go. Wait at the bottom of the stairs." Arjun shook his head. "But, please, trust me," Sundar said firmly. Reluctantly. Arjun turned and hurried down the hall. Sundar waited until his son disappeared from sight. Then he turned back to the door. He knocked again. Harder this time. "Om," he called, his voice low but steady. "It's okay. I am here. Open the door." For a moment there was only silence. Then he heard it, the soft sound of footsteps approaching the door. Slowly, the door creaked. Open again, just an inch. And this time Sundar could see more. He caught a glimpse of a dark figure in the shadows behind him. A man, tall, angry. Watching. Sundar single quotes, S heart pounded. Double quotes. he said gently. Is everything okay? Om's eyes darted to the man behind him, then back to Sundar. And for the first time, Sundar saw the truth in those eyes, fear so deep. It seemed to swallow the boy whole. And then, in a voice so soft it was barely audible, Om whispered one word. Help. Sundar's breath caught. Before he could respond, the door slammed shut, and the sound of a deadbolt clicking into place echoed down the hallway like a final warning. He stood there, staring at the door, his mind reeling. Inside that apartment, something terrible was happening. Something no child should ever have to. Indore, Dutt, and Sundar knew in that moment that walking away was no longer an option. He pressed his palm against the door, closed his eyes, and whispered to himself, I will not let this go. As he turned to walk back down the hallway, his phone buzzed again. He pulled it from his pocket, already dreading what he would see. It was another message from the unknown number. Last warning. Stop asking questions, or you'll regret it. Sundar stared at the words, his jaw tightening. Then he slipped the phone back into his pocket, squared his shoulders, and walked away. But in his heart he knew he was not stopping. Not now. Not ever. Asterisk beneath. The surface night after visiting Om's apartment, Sundar couldn't sleep. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy, thick with something he couldn't name. He sat in his study with the lights off, staring at the faint glow of his phone. The last message was still on the screen. Last warning. Stop asking questions, or you'll regret it. He read it over and over, feeling an odd mixture of fear and resolve. Whoever was sending these messages was watching him, but more importantly, they were watching Om. And what kind of man would he be if he stopped now? Just because it was dangerous? He thought of his son asleep upstairs, and of Om whispering that one fragile word, help, before the door slammed shut. And something inside him hardened. In the morning, the house was quiet. Arjun sat at the table, poking at his toast, his eyes distant. Sundar sat down across from him, waiting until the boy looked up. We're not giving up, Sundar said simply. Arjun blinked. But the man in the apartment? Yes, Sundar nodded. There's something going on, and we're going to find out what it is. But first, we have to be smart, careful. Arjun swallowed and nodded slowly. Okay, what do we do? Sundar reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook. He opened to a blank page and wrote the truth about Om at the top. First, he said, we collect information. People always leave clues. We just have to pay attention. That afternoon, Sundar drove back to the park. He walked the perimeter, eyes scanning the benches, the playground, the trees. He spoke to a few people, the man who sold ice cream. Near the fountain, an older woman who walked her dog every day. A young mother sitting with her baby. At first, no one knew much. But then the woman with the dog lowered her voice and said quietly, that boy, the thin one with the notebook. I've seen him here late at night, just sitting under the tree. And sometimes that man comes, grabs him by the arm, drags him. I don't like it, but it's not my place. Sundar's chest tightened. Have you ever heard what the man says? The woman hesitated. Once, she said finally. He said, you think anyone's coming to save you? You're nothing. Nobody cares. Sundar thanked her and wrote it all down. His hands trembled slightly as he closed the notebook. Later, he went back to the apartment building, alone this time. He stood across the street, leaning casually against a tree, just watching. The windows of apartment 27 glowed faintly. Shadows moved behind the curtains. After about 20 minutes, the door opened, and the man stepped out. He was taller than Sundar had realized, with a hard, angular face and a heavy coat. He looked around, almost as if checking to see if anyone was watching. Then he walked down the street and disappeared around the corner. Sundar waited another minute, then crossed the street and climbed the stairs. He stood outside the door and listened. The apartment was quiet. He knocked gently. After a long moment, the door cracked open. Om's wide eyes appeared in the gap. It's me, Sundar said. Softly, Om opened the door just enough for Sundar to slip inside. The room was dim, cluttered with papers and old furniture. The air smelled faintly of cigarettes and something sour. Ohm stood by the window, clutching his notebook. Sundar crouched down to meet his eyes. I need you to tell me. Sundar said quietly, what's going on here? Who is that man? Ohm shook his head quickly. You shouldn't be here. Please, Sundar said gently. You asked for help. Let me help you. Ohm swallowed hard, then whispered, he's not my dad. Sundar felt a chill run through him. Then who is he? Ohm looked down. My mom's boyfriend. He moved in last year. She said it was just for a little while. But then he never left. Sundar's throat went dry. And does he hurt you? Ohm flinched, then nodded once, barely perceptible. And your mother? Ohm didn't answer. But the silence was answer enough. Sundar exhaled slowly, trying to keep his voice steady. Listen to me, Ohm. This is not your fault. None of it. Do you understand? Ohm's eyes glistened, but he didn't speak out just then. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Ohm froze, his small body tense with fear. He's back, Ohm whispered. Sundar stood quickly. Where can you hide? Ohm pointed to a small closet. Sundar ushered him inside and slid the door shut, just as the front door swung open. The man stood there, his eyes narrowing at the sight of Sundar. What the hell are you doing here? The man growled. Sundar straightened, his heart pounding. I came to speak with Ohm. The man laughed bitterly. You've got no business here. Get out before you regret it. Sundar held his ground. Hurting a child is against the law. He said evenly. If you touch him again, I will make sure you're held accountable. The man stepped closer, his breath hot and sharp. You don't know who you're messing with, he snarled. This is none of your business. One more step, and you'll what? Sundar interrupted, his voice calm but firm. The man stared at him for a long moment, then scoffed and waved his hand dismissively. You're not worth it, he muttered. Then he stormed into the kitchen, slamming a cabinet so hard the dishes rattled. Sundar didn't wait. He moved to the closet, opened it, and crouched down. Come on, Ohm, we're leaving. Ohm's eyes widened in shock. But now, Sundar said firmly. He took the boy's hand and led him quietly out the door, down the stairs and into the cool night air. They didn't stop until they were back in the car. For a long moment, they sat in silence. Ohm clutched his notebook tightly, staring at the floor. Sundar rested his hands on the steering wheel, his mind racing. Finally, Ohm spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. He said, if I ever told anyone, he'd make me disappear. Sundar's jaw tightened. He won't touch you again, he said firmly. I promise you that. He started the car, but just as he turned onto the main road, his phone buzzed. Again, he glanced down at the screen. Another message. You crossed the line. Now you'll pay for it. Sundar swallowed hard and tightened his grip on the wheel. But in his heart, he already knew this wasn't just about Ohm anymore. Someone, maybe more than one someone, was watching him, and they weren't going to let this go without a fight. He looked over at Ohm, who had finally fallen asleep, his small frame curled against the door. Sundar clenched his jaw and whispered to himself, then let them come. I won't stop. But in the pit of his stomach, he knew the fight was only beginning, and he had no idea just how dark it was going. To get